All right, so I'm going to start with introducing our next set of speakers, which is really a delight for me because I get a chance to introduce one of my dearest friends and longest colleagues. And so certainly it's an honor to be able to introduce her. So Alicia Curran is again, a colleague of mine, and she has many, many skills, many, many strengths. But one of the things that I hold dear about her is that she's really helped me to become a clinician that completely embraces learning and also gets to see the wonder and the beauty and the possibilities within all of us. And so it's my honor to be able to introduce her. So Alicia is the mother of a 20-year-old son with autism. Following her son's diagnosis of autism, she devoted her professional career to work within the autism field. She currently works with the University of Missouri, and she's the director of operations at the ECHO Autism program. She is also a LEND family faculty member, a program manager and quality improvement lead for the Autism Learning Health Network and the Center for Disease Control's Act Early ambassador for the state of Missouri. She is a leader among leaders. She is able to help professionals, clinicians, parents, self-advocates to really know and think about how they use their voice and how they're able to really empower each other and think outside the box. And it is such an honor to be able to introduce her as our lead panelist, our moderator of a fantastic panel. And I'm really just want to impress upon all of you who are listening today. We've had a great set of speakers and a great set of people bringing us some really important topics, some that I hope have really encouraged you to embrace curiosity. And we get a chance now to really hear from people who have lived experience in many different aspects of autism spectrum disorder. So whatever it is that you're currently thinking, I want you to open up your mind and I want you to embrace the opportunity to be curious, embrace that opportunity to hear something that you might not have heard before, hear something in a way that you may not have thought about it in a way before, and allow yourself to think and to learn. And you never know what you might learn in the next hour or what we might learn from this group of people. I can tell you my life, both my personal life and my professional life have been changed by Alicia, as well as many of those that you're about to hear from in just a moment. So without further ado, I'm turning it over to Alicia for her to introduce the panel. Go ahead, Alicia.
Thanks so much, Dr. Soul. It's an absolute honor to work with Kristen Soul. She is a beautiful human being who really is on a mission to change the world, and allowing me to be able to ride along with her is an honor. So I have a fantastic group of individuals who I am lucky enough to call every single one of them friend. And, you know, I hope through our presentation, you know, we've had a lot of different opinions and different views presented during our symposium. And I think it's wonderful because I know one thing, my journey is my journey. And working in the autism field for nearly 20 years now, after my son's diagnosis, I will tell you that everybody's journey is different based upon their experiences. And so I love that this is a healthy space to present information and expand our minds and think outside the box, and remembering that every individual has that unique journey, and we make decisions that are best for ourselves and our families based on our experiences and what we know and what works for us. So without further ado, I am so very excited. Erica, if you can turn on your camera, we'd love to see your beautiful face. All right, I would love to introduce this phenomenal panel that we have today. I'm going to start with Stephen Shore. Stephen is a world-renowned autistic advocate. He serves on the boards of Autism Speaks, American Occupational Therapy Foundation, and is the president emeritus of the Asperger's Association of New England, as well as a board member on other autism-related organizations. He is a phenomenal public speaker, author, and is a special education professor at Adelphi University at New York, where his research focuses on matching best practice to the needs of people with autism. Katie New is the mother of 5 beautiful children. Her oldest 3 have an autism diagnosis. She and her husband and children live in a rural community, Missouri community, where she is a public defender. Katie is a passionate advocate for early identification and intervention, as through her own experiences, she's witnessed the positive impact that it has made in her own children. Joshua Edwards is a paraeducator where he supports children in an elementary school setting. He has a social work degree from Pitt State University and plans to become a case manager. Additionally, he is an extremely talented writer. Josh received an autism diagnosis at age 13 and feels that he was put on this earth to bridge the perspectives of people with autism and people without autism. One way Josh has created this bridge is through his own YouTube channel called Outliers Unlimited. You have to sign up today. Terry Walden is the mother of a 26-year-old with autism. She is the co-founder of Encircle Technologies and served as the executive director for 7 years. Encircle Technologies is now a program of Woodhaven in Columbia, Missouri, where Terry has transitioned to a teaching role, allowing her to pursue her lifelong dream of becoming a flower farmer. Terry's advocacy focuses on awareness and creating opportunities to foster strength-based programming that yields meaningful employment. And last but not least, Erica Guerrero. Erica is the mother of an 11-year-old with autism. A few years after her son's diagnosis, she left her career in business to move with her husband and son from Brazil to the United States, where they currently serve in ministry. They have been living in central Missouri for the past 5 years, where Erica has served as an incredible advocate for her son and others with autism and their families. So again, we are very, very lucky to have such a diverse and great panel. We'd like to start off with a question. Again, I kind of referenced to this earlier, about 17 years ago, when my son, Sam, got his diagnosis, I went through all kinds of emotions. And I just thought that was kind of the way it went until I started working in the field. And I realized that everybody's journey is different, from the point of concern all the way through now I have an adult. So I would really love for each of our panelists to share and describe what it was like for them at the time of diagnosis, whether it was the time that you learned of your own diagnosis, or you learned of your child's diagnosis, or in Katie's case, children's diagnosis, which she has 3 on the spectrum. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to kick this off with Katie. Would you like to unmute and share what it was like for you when you learned of your children's diagnoses?
As Alicia said, I have 3 children that have autism. I actually have 5 children, 2 sets of twins. My oldest is 8. My first set of twins is 4, and my second set of twins are 13 weeks. And I can assure you that that set of twins is so watched for developmental milestones. We will be on that very quickly. When my oldest was diagnosed, I don't feel like I had the full range of emotions that Alicia had. I'm a public defender, so I'm just naturally angry about things. I get fired up. I live in a very rural area in Missouri. We waited a very long time. At 12 months, I was concerned that my oldest had autism. It took me 4 pediatricians to find somebody that would make the referral. The 4th told me he didn't know anything about autism, but believed that parents knew best, so that he would make the referral. So of course, we kept looking for a more appropriate pediatrician, but took that referral that day. From there, it took 18 months to actually do the evaluation. The evaluation is an hour and a half from my home. They only do them starting at 8 a.m. and we had to be there at 7:30 for check-in. So I had to take my now 3.5-year-old out of bed at 5:30 in the morning to get him in the car, go for an evaluation that took 5 hours. When it was done, they actually handed the paperwork to somebody else and they kind of ushered me into a cubicle. I will never forget thinking that I felt like I was buying a car, like I was done with the salesperson and now we're going to go do the financing and we're going to go home. And what they told me that day is that he would never speak in sentences, that he would never learn to toilet, that he would never have a job, and that I was essentially looking at palliative care for the rest of his life. So I went to this evaluation knowing in my heart that this child had autism, and I left crushed. This was supposed to be the day that we learned so much, and instead they told me he would never do anything, he'd never be able to understand. Obviously, they were wrong. But I still left crushed. I left absolutely hopeless, and I was angry. This day, it took us 2 years to get here. We were supposed to leave with hope, and we left crushed. Of course, I went home and got to work getting all these services started. And what actually happened, because I live in a rural area, is we were on a wait list. He didn't start any services until he was almost 5, and I knew at 12 months that he had autism. And I say I knew, I'm not a doctor, but I was pretty sure. With my girls, it was a completely different experience. I became concerned at about 18 months with one of them. And at that time, the other twin didn't have any indicators that I saw. From there, I called the pediatrician, which fortunately we were able to find a great fit of a pediatrician. And I was still dreading the process. And she told me about the ECHO program and that she participates in that. So we set up an appointment in her office. It's 10 minutes from my house for 1 week later. At the conclusion of her evaluation, where my child was comfortable because she knows a pediatrician, we didn't have to drive 2 hours. Our pediatrician said she was comfortable making referrals for services. About 6 weeks later, she sent me the results that she did in fact have autism. When it was time that I became concerned for my third child that's now has a diagnosis, it was the same process. So both of my girls were diagnosed within about 6 weeks of me raising the issue with the pediatrician. And what is so amazing to me, and I promise to speed up my talking a little bit, is my now 8-year-old is still in an intensive needs special education classroom. One of my 4-year-old twins is entirely independent and is in a 100% regular education program, and she's in preschool. The other is about 80% regular education and will be about 100%, they think, by next year. Both of them are on target to start kindergarten in a 100% regular education classroom without a para. So what it's like for me depends greatly on how it happens. And there was a huge difference for me. That's why this program is so important.
Thank you so much, Katie. You highlighted the work and the power of ECHO Autism. And I didn't think I could be any more proud to work for a wonderful organization. But I think I have all the feels right now because it's just an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, Josh, I'm going to kick it off to you. What was it like when you learned that you had autism?
Well, hello, Alicia, and hello, everyone. I would say, if I'm being honest, I really don't know what I felt because when I was younger, I was about 6 or so, I had come to Kansas, 6 or 7 or so. I don't have a lot of memory, but I know that I was told years earlier that I had ADHD. And so I was sort of, I feel like maybe I was a little more prepared or at terms with that. So, in the rhythm of things. But when I learned about Asperger's syndrome, I didn't know what to think because I didn't know, I just heard a word. I didn't know what it meant. And I felt it had like an empty meaning. I mean, I felt like when I learned more about it, when I learned there were more people like me, it kind of helped, but I still had a lot to figure out. It kind of raised more questions than answers. Not at the time, because I was still, at the time, my mind could only really comprehend independently what was going on with school, the classroom, like a worker ant, they give you the work, you do it, that was it. My brain couldn't creatively or independently do things like outside of that because that was the only amount my brain could handle at the time. And I don't know if that was age or program, but I would say I felt maybe I felt content about it. I really didn't know what to feel, honestly. Maybe question answered with whole new question, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Thank you, Josh, for sharing that. All right, Terry, I'm going to turn to you. You have a 26-year-old, so it was, maybe a while ago, but when you received that diagnosis, we'd love for you to share what it was like for you.
Yes, and I'm so glad that things have progressed since 26 years ago. I am in Colombia, but the diagnosis really came in stages of awareness. First of all, I read a book and I was like, oh my gosh, this looks familiar. This sounds familiar. And then the preschool teacher said something is not happening with his, ability to grasp the language that I'm asking him to do. And then we went to a pediatrician who said the word autism. And then it was kind of denial. And then we went into school where he got, no, where he got a receptive language disorder. But then I knew it was more because within the school setting, like there were sensory overload kinds of things and just, boxes to tick that aligned more with what I was reading about autism. Then he got an educational diagnosis and then he got the medical diagnosis. So, throughout all of this, it's really been like you're on a rabbit chase and you're trying to find out, what best describes and what best fits. And but I do remember when it was the diagnosis of autism, and back then it seemed to be more like diagnose and adios. And I really love community of parents and individuals on the spectrum, and that we can so learn from each other. So I love the Facebook groups. I love all of those things that help us come together. And so I felt very isolated when I was became a parent of a child with autism because, like many of you say, you don't really know what that means. And when you go to the all-knowing internet, you hear that they'll never be able to do this, they'll never be able to do that. And whether that's, from medical, sites or wherever. And so that's very depressing. And then I think also as a parent, you wonder, did I do something? Did I eat too much sugar during my pregnancy? Yes. Did I have too many ultrasounds? I don't know. Maybe. Was my job too stressful? Did I cause my son to have these challenges that he, has had? And but I never asked myself the question, did I give him some of the strengths that he has? It was more like, what did I do wrong? And, or was it my genetics? Am I the one that gave this to him so that he would struggle in certain areas? And so all of that was very worrisome and very isolating. It's almost like, you're placed on a sideline watching everybody else kind of do that, typical thing while you're over there with a magnifying glass, looking for clues like, about what to do and about what caused it. And so you're constantly having to think and process this information. And, especially at the beginning, it's pretty scary.
Well, when you were speaking, I could see Katie, Erica, and I all saying yes, because I think that's one of the first questions a lot of people ask is, oh gosh, what did I do? But I love that you highlighted that, I never thought, what strengths did I give him? And that's so very true. And hopefully some family members, especially if you have a kiddo who's newly diagnosed, that will give you a ray of hope, because that's so very true. Thank you so much, Terry. That was awesome. All right, Stephen, I'm going to go ahead and switch to you. What was it like for you when you received your autism diagnosis?
Well, for my parents, it was very challenging for them. Although they did know that something was going on, because I was struck with the regressive autism bomb at 18 months. And it took them a whole year to find a place for diagnosis because there was so little known. And fortunately, my parents refuted the professionals' recommendations for institutionalization. One thing, I credit my parents for many things. One is providing for me what we would today refer to as an intensive home-based early intervention program but in those days, just parents desperately trying to reach their kid. One thing they did do, though, is they accepted me for who I was, but at the same time, they knew that a lot of work needed to be done if I were to lead a fulfilling and productive life. And part of what they did is that they used the word autism in the house just like any other word. So there was no discrete disclosure at some point that I am autistic. We talked about it just as Alicia has blonde hair. It just kind of was, and we worked with it. We didn't know much about autism in those days. Nobody else did either, but certainly knowing as opposed to denying or trying to hide it was a great help. So as a result, other than having memories from when I was non-speaking, there was no time that I didn't know that I'm on the autism spectrum. And I think that's very important. I think it's very important for autistic individuals to know, to the best of their ability and capacity, that they're autistic. And even more, what does it mean to be autistic? What does it mean to you? So one thing, for example, that it means to me to be autistic is that I have sensitivities to recessed lighting fixtures. Many of you may think that this hat's a fashion statement, and in many ways it is. It's always good to support my university. But really it's an accommodation, because for me, being under recessed lighting fixtures is probably like looking into a spotlight for many other people. Knowledge is power. Knowing that I have difficulty with facial recognition, like so many of us on the spectrum do. Not only permission to forgive myself for taking all semester to remember my students' names, and at the same time to advocate on my behalf, to tell my students, well, if it seems like I don't recognize you outside of class, it's because I don't. And here is the reason why. And depending upon the situation, I may go full boat with a full disclosure of being autistic. If I'm teaching a course on diagnosis and intervention in autism, that seems to be the way to go. But if it's a different situation, then I may just do a partial disclosure and just talk about the specific aspect of autism. Well, these lights are really bright for me. They hurt my eyes. I must have sensitive eyes. They give me a headache. So it's really a gift to be able to understand what it means to me to be autistic. Another thing is that I'm really honored to be presenting for this Echo Autism Community Symposium, especially in view of the part that I'm one of the hub team members of Echo Adult Autism Healthcare, working with Janet Schaus, Beth Ann Mallow, Dr. Dave Kodal, and many others. And I see the ECHO program as a wonderful way to bring community expertise to professionals who are seeking to learn more about autism. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stephen. I always say that, learning from you and Josh has made me a better parent to understand that perspective. My son, Sam, can't speak, communicate his feelings because he doesn't have a lot of communication, but through you are a voice for him. And I appreciate your and Josh's advocacy and teaching us. All right, Erica, what was it like for you when you received the diagnosis? And it wasn't in the United States, so you definitely have a unique perspective out of the panel for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia, for having me. Thank you all. It's such an honor to be here. And actually, I was listening to Katie, and I was listening before to Dr. Soul saying about the pediatricians don't have like the training, enough training, like it's about 4 weeks maybe that they have training about it. And I was just thinking that, yeah, probably it is the same in Brazil because the pediatricians there were not prepared at all, or maybe it's worse. our pediatrician, he was our personal friend, actually. So that made it'll be hard for us to look for other doctor because we trusted him. He was our family friend, and he was the best pediatrician in the city. And we were paying like private, the insurance didn't cover his appointment. So we thought that we had the best. And so we knew probably around 12 months that there was something going on, but he kept saying that he was okay. And we are trusting that maybe it was just a little bit of delay of development. But at some point when he was almost 2 years old, 20 months, around 20 months, we just told him we need to see a specialist. There is something going on. And he kind of felt that you are not trusting me, but I was sure that we needed to see a specialist. So he referred us to a neuro pediatrician. And then when we entered this neuro, we also needed to pay, and was super expensive because insurance didn't cover this kind of specialists. And I felt lost when I left, and I was listening to Katie. It was like, wow, that is interesting. We really go there thinking that we will leave with more information or more encouragement or support or something like that. But no, it was just like that is diagnosis after we had all the exams and lots of things. That took like 6 months to have the final appointment with the diagnosis. But it's just like, yeah, he's on the spectrum, and you need to start doing speech, OT, and behavior therapies, and then, and that is the least what you need to do with your child, and good luck. So I just felt totally lost, because it looked like that I was thrown in the ocean and I needed to get to the beach, but I needed to learn how to swim at the same time. I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know anything about autism. We didn't have experience with autism in our family and our even friends. So I was like, what it exactly is spectrum. Even like spectrum for me, autism was the word autism, only autism. And then when he said he's on the spectrum, it's like, okay, so there is an autism spectrum. So let's start from the beginning and let's research that. So I did my own research by myself. I started studying by myself. I felt that I didn't have support and people. And then when Terry was mentioning about being isolated and alone, I felt that too a lot, because I didn't have people that could help me, actually. And I was not blaming people because they actually couldn't. I was expecting from the doctor, but he didn't. But my circle of friends and family, they couldn't actually, because they didn't know either. So that was a kind of lonely journey that we did as a family. And I'm so thankful when we found Thompson Center and found Dr. Soul. That was, wow, our biggest moment as a family.
Thank you so much, Erica. You know, a few things that I've kind of extracted. For one, all of our experiences were different, but then we had some common feelings as well. And so I think that's something to note, especially for clinicians that are and professionals that are joining us, to note that every experience is certainly unique. And another thing that I think was really highlighted through, sorry, my light keeps going off, through all of, you know, all of the panelists that explain is, you know, lived experience should be really, really valued and adds to best practice care. Those parents that knew something was going on and had to figure it out and advocated for our kids. And I know Josh's parents and Stephen's parents did the same thing, and how powerful that is to listen to the family voice and making them an equal partner in the healthcare team, the education team, the community team, because it takes a village. You heard Amy Hess talk about her care team. And so it's so very important. Those points are so very important. And to give other family members, parents, hope who are listening and because, knowledge is power. And we do have that. And, you can acquire knowledge from a lot of places. Just make sure it's good knowledge, and relying on each other is just so powerful. All right, we're going to shift gears and talk about our journeys. I know that there are a lot of challenges during my journey and raising, Sam, but I will say that the blessings, of course, far outshadow any challenges that we face. But we're going to talk about challenges. We're going to talk about this tough stuff. So what is the biggest challenge that you faced, Terry, in your autism journey?
Always forget to unmute myself. Okay, so I think the biggest challenge that I've had is really flipping discouragement into encouragement. And that seems to be a theme here that I'm hearing as well. But discouragement, about our son came from so many different fronts. His own struggles with his identity. So I'm glad to hear Stephen talk about that identity piece. That was very tough for him. And then our own emotional struggles as we saw him struggle. And then as we came into interaction with other people who were telling us this or that, or who didn't tell us this or that. And then IEP meetings. Talk about the discouragement of a lifetime. And, just hearing the negative talk about your child. He did this, he did that. And, at some point I was just like, oh my gosh, is this all they can focus on? This is not going to be the focus for my son. And so I had to also address that in myself. And then just say, okay, all of this focus has been on what he can't do, his disability, not his ability. And I love ability should be used way more. And so that became my clarion call or whatever, to try to help I flip that in myself and in other people. And so I really tried to advocate for a strength-based approach rather than the deficit-based approach, which can be a medical model, can be a deficit-based approach. And I think maybe, that was used more in the past than it is now. I think there's been some, great advocates for autistic identity and the voices that are out there that have been so instrumental in saying this is an experience. I am a person, I am in the room. Listen to me talk, ask my opinion, listen to my parents. And let's, we can worry and we can stew, but let's get on with what is going to make me an individual who can come into my own rights. And so that has been both, I think the biggest challenge and the biggest blessing is when you can help, flip that light switch in situations where you can say, can we just move from this what he can't do like mentality, and let's raise the ceilings for everybody who has autism, for everybody, just everybody in general. Especially, let's not just point and put into boxes and create an industry over what people can't do. Let's create an industry on and a humanity on what people can do. And so, that's been kind of my focus, but I really had to kind of be knocked about a while into depressing states. And, when I saw my son getting bullied, it was just kind of like, oh, people are picking on what he might look like to them, what he can't do socially. Let's just get away from that society. Let's think about the good that every person can bring to the table. And so that's been one of my biggest advocate things. And that's why I started, that nonprofit to try to advocate for, that perception of an individual, and to help them know that they have worth and dignity, and nobody can tell them what they can or can't do. So
Fantastic. Fantastic. Words of inspiration for sure. Thank you so much, Terry. All right, Stephen, how about you? What is the biggest challenge that you have faced?
Well, I think the biggest challenge relates to meaningful and productive employment. I'm honored and proud to be part of the rarefied 12% of those of us on the spectrum who are employed to our capacity. And that we really need to focus on making fulfilling and productive employment for autistic individuals the rule rather than the exception. So for me, employment was difficult at first, even though as a young child, I started with a paper route, which was a full-size business in miniature. That was very helpful. That went well. I then got interested in bicycle repair, which also worked very well. I did spend some time in a cleaning tables in a busy restaurant, and that was just a basket full of sensory violations. So that didn't work at all. Employment as a professor, initially there were some challenges to that because as with many of us on the spectrum, we have difficulty perceiving and processing hidden curriculum or unspoken rules. And there's so many unspoken rules that in any job situation, most people seem to understand automatically. Now, us autistic people can learn these rules. However, we so often need direct instruction. So what I've learned from this is the importance of having mentors and people I can trust in the workplace so that I can consult with them as things occur. If something I don't understand occurs, I can talk to them, or I can plan with them courses of action to prevent misunderstandings from happening in the workplace. So I think we need to, one area we need to focus on is educating employers the benefits that can occur by hiring autistic individuals.
Fantastic, absolutely. And so I'm going to go a little out of order. I gave everybody an order, but I think it would, I'd be remiss if I didn't go to Josh. And I saw that you were really shaking your head and agreeing with Stephen. So Josh, I don't know if that's your biggest challenge, but I know that you are now a paraeducator and you started this school year. And so if you just want to take just a couple of minutes to validate or share a different experience that then Stephen had with that, and then share your biggest barrier as well.
Oh, my biggest challenge with Asperger, Alicia, just making sure. Well, actually, yes, I was. I really felt like what Stephen was definitely at least something I could relate to, and I wouldn't be surprised that at least quite a few, not all, but quite a few others on the spectrum would relate to. He mentioned mentors as well as, how should I say, I believe, maybe it wasn't him, I believe it may have been Terry mentioning, someone else mentioned identity. And I felt like that was definitely something. I mentioned my my limitations of independent thought, the way I was throughout school, and I felt like that kind of both helped and hurt me, because after graduation, I felt like I didn't have a sense of identity. You know, like when people have a job and then they have to retire or something happens, they have to leave that job, and then they don't have a sense of self. And I felt like I didn't have that, and it hurt me. And that was one barrier. Another was environment. And even when I did have mentors, I felt like they had to leave, like teachers. I the year passes, and so when I could use them, I don't see that opportunity, because sadly my mind works out of sight, out of mind. And well, when you have to meet deadlines for homework, you're not allowed to think about anything else, and that's just for a kid. That's hard enough for a kid without disabilities, and it definitely didn't help. And so I feel like it also would have helped if I had more people I could relate to. It helps when you know more people with passions and interests. For someone who wanted to be involved in variety entertainment, it wasn't exactly easy growing up in Kansas. And you didn't know. I also struggled with communicating. I struggled with expressing thoughts. I would say I don't know my biggest challenge, but those that I mentioned are definitely my biggest. And also sense of self. And what Stephen, I remember what he said about his parents. I respect and admire, because that was exactly what my parents did for me. And I've realized how important it is, both on both sides, what happens when parents do and don't tell you, because my parents were always open about my challenges and they never denied it. Even if I didn't understand what it meant, I felt like they still accepted me. At least they accepted who I was and that I was their son no matter what. And I felt like you can't lie to to your children, because even if you're afraid it's going to hurt them, how are they going to be their best self if you don't let them know that they have this challenge to overcome? It's not fair to them.
Mhm. Yeah,
And it's just, I have to admire that. You're not being fair to them if you're not letting them know who they are
absolutely. Absolutely. Thank
or
you.
what they have. The disability may not be who they are, but they'll never know if they don't know what they have.
Mhm. No, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Josh. All right, Katie, biggest challenge.
In the area I live in, truthfully, the biggest challenge has been getting access to resources. I previously mentioned the wait list. The day my oldest was diagnosed, he was put on 6 wait lists, I think, and those services didn't pick up for over a year. So there was all this lag. I mean, at this point, he was over 4 years old, and I was confident he was on the spectrum by the time he was 12 months old. When we did get taken off of the wait list, the services are an hour and a half away, and they are, 3 times a week for a half an hour at 3 o'clock. Well, to overshare about my personal life, it was just me and my now 8-year-old at that time. I didn't have that option. I couldn't not work 3 days a week and also pay for those services. But because I worked, I didn't qualify for Medicaid. I actually had somebody tell me, well, quit your job. Well, then I guess we would have lived in my car. I'm not sure what that looks like. And even still, a number of the services that my children are able to participate in are 45 minutes away. My now husband actually stopped working. We have pretty much turned our home into a giant therapy room, which is great, and it is working. My oldest speaks in sentences. He can read. He does toilet, to follow up on what I was given the day of his diagnosis. He is increasingly independent. My 4-year-olds are moving towards regular education. It does work, but the challenge is that none of these services are here. And when I say that, people say, well, what do you want from me? Or you can move. Well, I'm sure we could move, but I need them here. I need them in this community. And not every family, I'm very cognizant of the fact that we're lucky enough that my spouse was able to quit working. And we joke that I manage all of the qualifications and get everyone signed up for the services and micromanage the schedule, and he implements the schedule. But not everybody's that fortunate. And I just know that there are children here in my community that are not having any of their needs met because they're not able to do that.
Thanks, Katie. Yes. Erica, biggest challenge for you?
Yeah, I'm with Katie. I think that we have phases, and like my first challenge was for sure access to resources. We were still in Brazil, and we were living in the São Paulo metropolitan area, so it is not exactly far from what I was living, but the traffic, I would spend like 2 hours to go to a therapy and 2 hours to come back. And I was working full time. So you work and then maybe you make the money to pay for, but then you don't have the time to take your child. And it's just, it doesn't work. And where we lived, we didn't have like ABA, for example, that we knew that we needed a lot of behavior therapy, and the OT was not a specialist in autism, so she was trying to help, and the speech was not a specialist in autism. She was trying to help, but was not, so we couldn't see like improvements. And even he was doing some stuff, we were stuck. We couldn't see it, and I didn't have any option. So even when you have the money, you don't have the professionals that they can help you, and that is it's really hard. And I totally agree with Katie. After we moved, we were super happy because we did have the professionals here in Colombia, and Tomas started thriving, but then he had another phase, behaviors that were really challenging for our social life. So we couldn't be in many of places. We couldn't be around other children, and we started having issues at school. So in the educational system, even they helped us a lot in the beginning when we had the big challenge and we needed them the most, they couldn't help us the way that we expected, and they were not listening actually to us. So then it took like 2 years, almost 2 years, finally, when they listened to us and they did something that we asked them, started working better. So I think we have different challenges during our journey. And we will also have, and as Terry said, I like to look to the bright side. I'm always looking that he is a happy child. He is a delight. I love him. And I don't like when people are saying like, he cannot do, he's not getting better, or he's not improving. I don't like to listen to that. And then we try always to show people that, yes, he can. Let's just try in a different way. Let's just believe in him and listen to us a little bit more, because we are parents and we know them really well. I love that, Alicia, you taught me a long time ago that you are Sam's specialist. You know him better than anyone. And I always say that, like, I know my son better than anyone. So I know that we can work that together. Just let's have this honest conversation and work together.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, I mean, again, I highlight the lived experience, and it's an advantage to all autism professionals, because we really, people with autism and parents, they really do extend what professionals have to offer. And so, definitely can't highlight that enough. So I know we've got a couple of questions, but I've struck a deal with Dr. Brown so we can get through our last question. So what key elements has really been instrumental in allowing you or your family to live their best life? I think that's an extremely powerful question. And so we have about 2 minutes each for you to share, but we would love to know, like, what's the biggest impact that's been instrumental in allowing you to live your best life. And Erica, I'm gonna go to you first, and let you tell us about that.
Okay, let's try in 2 minutes. I think the best thing that I can share is my experience with Dr. Kristen Soul, and that would be a good example of what it looks like to be people that makes difference in our lives. And I know that all the professionals, they are physicians, therapists, they can relate to that. It's when we came here in 2014, we came to do an evaluation, and we were so lucky that Dr. Soul was in charge of Tomas' evaluation. And I just remembered when I came back to Brazil, and I was waiting for the report. And then when I was reading all the evaluation, and being honest, I was sad, because when you see that your child is so behind of everything that he could, it's just like, wow, it's the picture. It's not what what I'm expecting, because for me, he was bright and great. And then he doesn't have the skills. He can't. And that was the picture, the true. But at the end, she said, even though that you are seeing this, like maybe he is not an average of he could be, even though Tomas is a brilliant child, he is sweet, he is a delight, and I would love to help him if I can. And I just could see her heart. And I never had this experience with someone, a professional, because they were so like, I'm the professional, we were the family, and here it is, this is a prescription, this is what we need. It was so personal and so thoughtful and so meaningful to us. I was like, she really cares, and she sees him as a child, and she wants to help him. She really wants to help him. So I think that is the most beautiful thing that we can find when people just look at us, our children, or at us, if you are an autistic person, as a unique person. We are all unique, but we need that. We need that awareness that we are unique, and you need to meet our needs in our uniqueness. And that is what she did. And when we moved here in 2016 and we started working with him, I just felt embraced, and it was like I was part of the family. And that is, for me, is the best experience that we can share.
Yes. Well, you've highlighted exactly why I'm honored and I love working with her, because you're exactly right. That's a perfect description of Dr. Soul. All right.
And you, because after I arrived, you were here, and you're so amazing.
Oh, good. Yes. Kristen said, Dr. Soul says, I'm crying. You're crying. Yes. I think we all have tears for sure. Yes, well, it's certainly an honor to be alongside you for the last past years, Erica. All right, Stephen, how about you? What's been the key element or person that's really allowed you to live your best life?
Well, as I mentioned before, it began with my parents, who accepted me for who I was and realized a lot of work was needed in order to lead a fulfilling and productive life, as they used, as that I heard some of you mention already, a strength-based approach, focusing on what I can do, as opposed to getting all tied up on what I can't do. I have yet to meet someone who has built a career out of remediated weaknesses. Now that said, now that I've been married for almost 31 years, it's my wife who has been most supportive of my activities. Originally, when she first realized my being on the autism spectrum, she was fine with it, but she was afraid of what other people might do. She was afraid of the potential stigma that I might lose my job and that I'd lose social standing. And given the fact that she grew up during the Cultural Revolution in China, that makes perfect sense. But then when she realized that, well, we're not in China, it's not the Cultural Revolution, she has become my greatest supporter. So I give that, I give those accolades to my wife.
Fantastic. Oh, that's amazing. Yes. Thank you so much, Stephen. Terry, how about you?
Yeah, so I think when I look back at Cody's life so far, that it's really a group of people who are kind of like these, I don't know, these lights along the way, and they all share that they see him and they appreciate who he is, and many of them nurture his talent. Like, his talent was in music. And so, the guitar teacher who he sat with for 6 or 7 years, that was the best therapy ever. And he was a gentle, kind person, and Cody could excel in playing the guitar. And or just, the person who helped him on the keyboard, and just a patient, loving person, or our case manager at Boone County Family Resource Group, who just was like just talking to him like it's or the differentiated learning instructor at Rockbridge High School, who had the autism classroom, where Cody got to enter into what some of the positive people out there on the spectrum, and that it wasn't the people who always got bullied or the people who always got shunned. It was people who had strengths in coding or, interest in all the stats of Mizzou athletics, and things like that. So it's really been a chain of people who have just taken that time to look at him and say, I see you, I recognize what you can bring to this world, and yeah, and build him up some. So that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Josh, how about you?
Could you remind me, please?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
people or
The people or something like what a key element.
key elements.
Yeah,
Thank
has
you.
been instrumental in allowing you to live your best life.
Encouragement. Encouragement, school or otherwise, has always made a difference. Hearing about this, Terry brought up a lot of good points, and Erica, I can't remember exactly what she said, but there was something that I really related to, and something I thought about: personable. When I was in school, and also everything direct, I think I remember you have to be personable. And Eric talked a lot about you. She thought of the patients as children, and that's what you have to do. You have to recognize, like with my job, as you can imagine, like anything else, especially in this field, it can be emotionally challenging, and you have to remember that the children don't always recognize the frustration or what you're feeling. This isn't their intention. That you have to recognize, even if you're feeling or feeding off of it, you have to recognize they are not aware they're giving it to you. You have to recognize that the challenge is one that they're experiencing. And you have to separate the frustration. You have to remember, especially if this is one you've had, a challenge you've had, what it was like for you. You have to recognize why you're here. You're here because they need you. And you have to be there. You have to be centered because they need you. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't do that. And even what's even worse is when I was in college, I learned too little too late. But some teachers, they just have given assignment. They don't give you homework or prep. They just expect you to do tests and quizzes and then pass the class. And they're not personable. And when I was in high school, all the teachers I had, K through 12, were personable. They took interest as best they could. They didn't treat us like as a group. They treated us as individuals. And when I was in high school, I had an interpersonal skills course that made a big difference. Taught the basics. Stephen or someone mentioned the basics, direct. And that made a big difference for me. They made it clear about how to interact with communication skills. And sometimes you need to know the basics. That's the big issue. And that doesn't always come naturally to people like me. And I would say I've had friends who have been with me in my worst and see me through to my best. And my family, I've never felt more humbled in my life. I'm very grateful. And that's definitely one of the issues I had in community college. I didn't feel like I was with teachers, at least not what teachers are supposed to be. Then my last semester, I had a computer class I was struggling, but he was encouraging. He didn't quit on me. And the same with the geology course, which I was not doing the best at. But he didn't give up on me. And even though I didn't have the best grade, I had the pride. I felt like I was back in what a school is supposed to be. And I felt human again.
Those are wise words for every single one of us to hear. Thank you so much, Josh. Katie, I'm going to let you go ahead and round us out and close us out with your key elements or key person that really is allowing you to live your best life.
So I think for us, it's kind of two things. There's a huge turnover of providers in this area. People don't tend to stay very long. So there's just not longevity in those supports. And then it's back to the waiting list and back to starting at ground zero. But I also think it's really important for people to get past autism awareness. People know what autism is. We need to get to an understanding phase. My my children that are on the spectrum are very fortunate in that they are able to communicate verbally, although not in ways that you would necessarily expect for their age. But we do, as a family, go on vacations. We go to the grocery store. We do all of those things. And sometimes there's a meltdown or two, or we're struggling. And I have no problem looking at somebody and saying, this is Liam, he has autism and he's really struggling. If you could turn off this light or give them, whatever it is. But in our community, people kind of look at us like, what is going on there? So what helps, I think, my children is that that's how we live our lives. That's how we live our household. And we've really, through this program and others are trying to make those impacts. But I think that is really important. And my children at least know that they have that with us, that whatever their needs are, they will be met. And to the extent that they can tell us what their needs are, that will be met. And we're fortunate enough to have some people on the therapy teams and whatnot that have really helped empower them to say that for themselves. Even my 4-year-old tells me all the time she needs some space when she's overwhelmed. And I think that's really important for her to be able to do that, but also for her and my other children to know that those requests will be honored and accepted, even if I don't have an understanding of why she needs space.
Right. Oh, it's absolutely beautifully said. Thank you so much. As I've read the research over the years, I've learned about family resiliency, and now it's starting to really, the research is starting to think about autistic people as well. And all of you hit on all the key points that combined the research is talking about, which is access, family, community, school, that support, that encouragement, that empowerment. And this is really what Echo Autism is all about. Echo Autism is about empowering a bunch of professionals to have the autism expertise to apply to their therapy or their teaching, or whatever type of provider that they may be. And we're building capacity in home communities so that communities can become ready to serve and support people with autism and their families so that they can live their best life. And so it really warms my heart. Thank you all for sharing such really powerful perspectives, unique perspectives. And again, what I take away with is what I said in the beginning. We all have unique perspectives based upon our experiences, yet we have so many things in common. It is a privilege to have sat on this panel with you and moderated this fantastic panel. Thank you for sharing. We appreciate each and every one of you.